Check this out. We've got, from the Daily Mail, Buffalo Public School claims all white people perpetuate systemic racism and force kindergartners to watch video of dead black children to warn them about racist police and state-sanctioned violence. Fatima Morell is Associate Superintendent for Culturally and Linguistically Responsive Initiatives at Buffalo Public Schools in New York. Morell has introduced a new curriculum, lesson plans, and teacher training. The teachers are encouraged to be more woke in their efforts at anti-racism. Morell suggests teaching kindergartner classes about children killed by police with videos featuring Trayvon Martin, Tamir Rice, and others. Older pupils learn all white people play a part in perpetuating systemic racism. A whistleblower told City Journal about the new lesson plans. Morell is yet to comment on the controversial new teaching programs. I wonder if they have some photos. So there's one post where it says, I am Ayanna, I was sleeping. I am Trayvon, I was walking. Anti-racism, a powerful collection of anti-racist policies that lead to racial equity and are substantiated by anti-racist ideas. They're indoctrinating kids. They're teaching kids this is illegal. The 1964 Civil Rights Act says you can't discriminate on the basis of race. These people, they're being referred to as neo-racist. I just consider them like...
Good old-fashioned racist.
Yeah, it's good old-fashioned racist. It's the same thing. It didn't change. It's still racism. They're literally like, that race is bad. Okay, well, then you're racist. They're doing it in schools.
Imagine the psychology of a small child hearing this and seeing just the traumatic imagery of death, and then that being pushed along with, of course, the big propaganda. We have to also understand they use a lot of graphic images to push this, because when you're emotionally shocked, when you're in a constant state of fear, you don't critically think. And for kids to see something traumatic and then be told, hey, if you're white, you're perpetrating systemic racism no matter who you are, what you do, because of the way you were born. That is just absolutely absurd, sickening, and crazy, and destroying the youth of this nation.
So there's this image that we've talked about a bit before, and I'm sure most of you are familiar with. It's the equity fence, which is this meme. It's fairly viral, and it looks like this one got a graphical update. Look at that. Very, very nice. On the left, it says equality. There is a tall man, a medium-sized man, and a short, well, I don't know if they're men or women, person. And they're all standing on a crate. The short person can't see. The fence is in the way. The medium person can see over the fence, and the tall person can clearly see. The next panel on the right says equity. Now, the tall person has no crate, but he can still see. He's tall. The person in the middle still has one crate, but the short person now has two. And now the short person can see the baseball game as well. My favorite response to this is from libertarians, where they say they're all stealing.
They are.
They're all stealing because you can pay for tickets. But I want to point something out. When they're teaching kids about this stuff and they show this image, what they're not explaining to the kids, because all the people here are brown skinned, they're all of the same race. What they're not telling you is, on the side that says equity, where you have the three people standing up, imagine the tall person is of one particular race. Then imagine someone from the government taking away from that person and giving it to someone else based on their race. Now imagine that the person who is tall is actually a black person and the person who is short is a white person. Would you justify the government coming and taking from the black community to give to the white community? Their argument is, well, we just know who is quantifiably privileged or underprivileged, but you don't know. Would it make sense for the government to take away from like a working class, white family where the dad is a carpenter and the mom is an a car salesperson, and they take money from them and give it to Oprah's family?
Well,
basing on race is meaningless.
Well, this is the thing. We even had one of the head board members of the New York City Education Organization publicly come out and say, if there's a rich or middle-class black person and a poor white kid, resources have to go to the middle-class rich black person because of systemic historic racism. So we have literal heads of education in New York City arguing for this. And there's a third meme that's related to the meme that you have up there, and it's a third panel, and it says when government gets involved, and it shows the tall person and the middle person getting their legs chopped off as a representation of whenever the government gets involved, that I tweeted a long time ago, which I think is also perfectly representative of what actually happens when the government tries to solve a problem that usually they're the ones that perpetrated it and created it. They usually make it a lot worse. So
I can't find it. I'm trying to find it. There's a bunch of silly versions of this, though. There's like liberation. There's no fence anymore.
Oh.
I like that one because it makes no sense. Because there's like, so does the outfield go forever?
Apparently.
So it's like the outfielders can keep running and there's no home runs. So
Rules
long
don't
as
matter.
it's all an RBI. Yeah, the rules don't matter. They're teaching kids this stuff. And they're not teaching kids enough to explain anything to them about what it really means. It's just indoctrination. These kids are going to grow up as dogmatic tribalists. And I'll tell you what's funny. Many on the left said similar things about religion, back in the day. Kids growing up with religious indoctrination. Oh, it's a problem. I don't care. Sure, fine. I'll tell you what. It doesn't justify you becoming the dogmatic religious lunatics. But I tell you, it's really crazy. Watching this cult spread. There's an organization called Free Press. The Free Press, that's what it's called. freepress.net. I used to know these guys. I actually only a few years ago was sitting down with one of the guys from the Free Press talking about freedom of speech, freedom of the press, our ability to communicate. And then in the past 2 years, the organization has called for banning and censoring misinformation and the far right and political ideas they don't like. And I'm like, how have you gone so insane with this cult that an organization called the Free Press would launch a campaign to censor people based on their opinions?
Well, we saw Democrats in Congress recently write that letter talking about banning Fox News and One America. It's really, really concerning. And Tucker Carlson, he's been one of the main targets from Media Matters and what have you. And so he's really been sounding the alarm on that. And it really is becoming a big problem in terms of rhetoric that we're seeing from people in power.
Yeah.
Right.
And so it's completely absurd just because it's CNN and MSNBC, they do.
How do you fight this kind of thing, right? It's like a religion.
Homeschool. Reading this article really made me proud of understanding the larger homeschool network in New Hampshire that happens in that particular state. It's one of the largest homeschooling states and also the smartest state compared to, of course, IQs of other states, which tells you a lot, because when you give up your child to the institution of the state for, quote, education, you're not really getting educated. You're getting indoctrinated into the propaganda. This is the newest level of propaganda that they're introducing people so they could go along with their bigger agenda, the newer agenda. But of course, there was an older agenda. The school system has failed our children. It has failed me. It has failed a large number of individuals, and it's not there to uplift people. It's not there to help people find their skills, their passions, their loves. It's not there to help people in their journeys in life. It's there to keep them in institutions so they could be good factory workers, and that's what school systems were built on by the Rockefeller Institute, trying to, of course, rinse and repeat, create good factory workers.
Was it Michael Malice who said that one of the only places a child will experience violence will be in a school?
Yes,
was it Michael who said that?
Yeah.
And I'm not sure if it was Michael who said this, but someone said they're effectively prisons.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what he said. Yeah.
Yeah, Michael said that.
Yeah.
And I agree. I think schools, public schools particularly. I've been to private school. I went to Catholic school for the first, up until 5th grade. And then 6th grade, I transferred to public school. Public school is just awful. There's like limited supervision. They don't care. The kids are not really learning things. It was just really, really bad.
I saw extreme amounts of violence in New York City. There was a kid that got shot in my classroom. Like, I can't even go into just some of the graphic details of what I saw growing up there. But essentially, when you really look at it, it's run like a prison. The same companies that build the schools are the same companies that also build the prisons. I remember visiting my friend in prison just a few months ago and being like, this looks a lot like my school. And then remember, like, oh yeah, they work for the same kind of contracting organizations that build these larger institutions. And it's not just the construction of these buildings, it's also the way that they're run. It's also the way that teachers bark orders at students, scream at them, tell them to stay in line, tell them to regurgitate whatever they say, and if they don't have the same opinions as they do, they get punished. And essentially, even in college, if you have a opinion that a professor doesn't like, they're going to give you a worse grade than if you had a opinion that actually disagreed with them.
Think about where this school stuff leads to, right? Check it out. You're going to have, right now, you got all these teacher unions saying, we're not reopening. We're not going to go back to work. We don't want to go back to school, but pay us.
Not essential.
Sure. They say, but we want to make sure the schools are safe. I really just don't believe you. Fine, whatever. They don't want to reopen schools. Wealthier families are just homeschooling their kids and they're putting them in learning pods where they hire tutors. The tutor gets 20 to 30 kids. That tutor's probably making bank, to be honest. Because all these parents are now like, well, pay $100 a week or something, and they got 30 kids, so these tutors are just raking in the dough, teaching a various group of kids throughout the day. These kids are getting one-on-one education in a small classroom with a professional educator to some degree. These kids, when they get older, they're going to be smarter, better, faster, stronger, all of these things because they're getting invested in. These other kids who are going to these schools and are being indoctrinated are going to be, they're being kept out of school. They're being given very awful education. They're getting these Zoom classes. Most of the kids don't even pay attention. They're not going to school. The teachers don't care. The teachers don't want to be there. The teachers are arguing, keeping the schools shut down. And then when they are there, they're getting indoctrinated with garbage. So what happens? You're going to end up with two 20-year-olds. One 20-year-old from the pods. From the learning pods, not the dystopian pods. And they're going to be sitting there and they're going to be socially savvy. They'll have grown up around adults. They'll have learned the intricacies of, normal human living. And they're going to have a conversation with an employer and say, I worked very hard. I was, I ran my family's business when I was 18. I did this. I was educated at these institutions. I did homeschool for these years. And they're going to be like, oh, this person's articulate, well thought out. I think they can bring a lot to my company. Then they're going to look at the next resume and the person's going to be like, well, I am a person of color and it means you have to hire me. And I didn't go to school because the teachers didn't want to show up, but I did learn about equity from watching MTV videos on YouTube. And they're going to be like, I'm not going to hire you. Like, you don't bring value. Now, the one thing that could change that, of course, is if we get really extreme leftist, draconian woke policy, where the companies like in California are forced to bring on, women and minorities to their board. So then it's like if your company's of a certain size, you have to fire a white guy and then hire a woman of color or something. So then maybe that will actually happen, where you're going to have people show up and they're going to be like, well, you have to hire me, so there you go. And then you end up like Venezuela. I mean, I know Venezuela is kind of the go-to example, but in Venezuela, man, they make jobs for the sake of making jobs. They don't need a job. Well, we'll just make it there could be a job for one person. Let's say the job, the example I often give is when I was trying to buy a cell phone in Venezuela. It was like 5 different people I had to talk to buy a cell phone because they just created the jobs because they need to have jobs. In the US, you walk into a T-Mobile or an AT&T or a Sprint, there's one person, you're like, yo, I want a phone. I'm like, okay. They pull out the phone, they sign you up, you give them the credit card, they say bye-bye. Yeah. Not in Venezuela.
The amount of mandatory signage that businesses need in Venezuela is absolutely ridiculous. They have to dedicate an entire wall to all the permits, to all the regulations, to all the rules, and also a huge no smoking sign and a huge no guns are welcome here sign in Caracas, Venezuela, at one time the murder capital of the world. And
it's not anymore?
It fluctuates between other Latin American countries. But when I went there, it was the #1 murder capital in the entire world. They outlawed people having firearms. And guess what? Homicides through firearms skyrocketed because all the people were disarmed and only the criminals had the firearms. Even private security, in some instances, wasn't allowed to have firearms. And the police officers were working with, of course, politically motivated institutions and groups that protected each other. Meanwhile, other people were left to, of course, the gangs. And I forgot the exact name of this one motorcycle gang that was wreaking havoc on a whole bunch of communities. But again, when you go to Venezuela, it's been wrecked by absolute violence to the point where police officers and other authorities were literally telling me, hey, if you're driving at night and there's a red light, just don't worry. Don't stop. Just go right up ahead.
Yeah.
I was a dirty smoker at the time too, and the hotel was like, no, senor, no smoke here. I'm like, okay, I'll go over there. They're like, no, you're gonna get killed there. I'm like, well, then what do you want me to do? Like, I'm gonna smoke too now. Screw you, man. Like, call the cops.
Now I'm all nervous.
Yeah, I'm even more nervous. I don't smoke anymore. That was a bad phase that I had. Don't smoke. It's really bad for you.
Right.
But again, it just shows you the utter lunacy of more government.
Thanks for checking out this clip from the Timcast IRL podcast. If you want to see the full show, come back to this channel, youtube.com/TimcastIRL, Monday through Friday at 8 p.m., where you can leave comments and super chat, and we actually will read your comments on the show. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and if you want exclusive members-only content, segments you can't get anywhere else, go to timcast.com, become a member, and we even have full bonus episodes. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you all next time.